I kicked my dad and brother out of my house after what they did to my daughter. So here's the deal. I'm a mom and I've got this family, me, my husband and our 4 awesome kids. But this story I'm about to tell you really zooms in on my eldest daughter Stella, who's 15 years old. She's pretty cool, you know. Anyway, my husband and I were pretty keen on this idea that being part of our community is super important. It's like we want our kids to not just live in their own little bubble but to really get out there, meet people, and do some good. One of the ways we thought would be great for them to do this is by helping out at our local Catholic church. Now this isn't just any help. Twice a month the oldest of our bunch get to step into the shoes of ushers. You might wonder, what's an usher? Well, they're the friendly folks who stand at the doors, greeting you with a smile, holding those doors open for you so you can walk in without a hitch. They're also the ones who pass around those baskets during the service where you can drop in some money to help out the church. And they help everyone figure out when it's their turn to get up and go for communion. It's pretty neat because they get to be a big part of the service and help everyone out. Now, my dad, he's been doing this usher thing for a while too. So when my kids do their usher gig, they're hanging out with grandpa at the church, which is pretty cool, right? So this one weekend, it was time for their usher duties again. My parents, being the awesome grandparents they are, picked up all 4 of my kids to take them to church and even treated them to dinner afterward. Meanwhile, my husband and I were decked out in our Halloween costumes at a party. When the kids got back home, Stella, being the responsible teen she is, sends me a text. She's like, "Hey, we're back home safe, chilling and watching a movie. Oh, and send me some pics of those Halloween costumes, will ya?" I thought, cool, everything's all good. But then, the next day rolls around and Stella comes up to me with this serious look on her face. She's like, "Mom, I gotta tell you something. I don't think I want to do the usher thing at church anymore." And I'm thinking, whoa, what's up? Because, you know, Stella usually loves helping out and hanging with grandpa at the church. She then tells me about this incident that totally took me by surprise. While she was doing her thing, holding the door open for people, this old man from the church, Joseph, comes up to her. Now Joseph is one of those guys who's super involved in the church. Everyone knows him. He walks up to Stella and tells her, "Hey, follow me." And that's where Stella paused her story, leaving me hanging and super worried about what might have happened next. So here's the deal. Stella, who's part of the story, felt really weird and uncomfortable because this guy was trying to make her hang out with him at church, which she did not want to do at all. She tried to get someone to notice that she wasn't okay, but it was like no one was catching on. Then, she ended up telling me about it. I was totally out of the loop until she shared what was going on, so I was like, wait, what? And I immediately called my mom to see what was up since she hadn't mentioned anything about it either. My mom then told me that Stella did actually tell my dad she was feeling awkward and didn't want to do her usual church job because of this guy. My dad was cool about it and told her she could just chill with my mom and her younger brothers and sisters during the church service instead. But here's the thing, my mom didn't know the whole story. She only knew Stella felt weird around this dude, but not the details, so that's the background info. Jumping to what happened last night, my 36-year-old brother came over to hang out with my husband in our garage for a bit, just to catch up and have a drink. Out of the blue, my parents showed up at our place. They didn't tell us they were coming. They just wanted to drop off some candy for the kids. I hadn't talked to my dad since I found out about the uncomfortable church situation a few days before. So, when I saw my parents, I decided it was a good time to ask some questions. I was curious if this Joseph guy had any official role at church, and my dad was like, nope. Then I asked him if he was planning to talk to the main church priest to let him know what had happened with Stella and Joseph. But my dad said he'd only do that if Joseph started causing trouble. So that's the whole story made super simple and stretched out like we're just chatting about it. So there was this situation where I felt it was important to tell the priest about something concerning an old man named Joseph. I wasn't sure if Joseph was just having a bad day or if there was something more serious going on with him, like he might be getting forgetful because of old age, or maybe he was sick in a way that made him act out without realizing it. I thought the priest should know so he could keep an eye on things just in case. But my dad didn't see it the same way. He thought Joseph was just being a friendly old guy. And nowadays it seems like you can't even be nice without someone taking it the wrong way. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him that just saying sorry to the old man and not doing anything else about it could mean this could happen again to someone else. My dad still didn't agree and thought that if we told the church, they might stop Joseph from doing things he likes at church. I got really upset and pretty much shouted at my dad that if Joseph likes being creepy, then maybe it's a good thing if the church stops him. I ended up telling my parents they had to go. As my dad was leaving, he made a sarcastic comment about not wanting to be too harsh on Joseph. That just made me lose it even more. I shouted back, telling him I couldn't believe he cared more about Joseph's feelings than what was right, especially for his own granddaughter. My brother, out of nowhere, decided he wanted to add more drama to an already tense situation. He started by saying I was overreacting about something that happened with an old man. According to him, I was trying to make the old man look like a bad guy and saying he shouldn't be allowed near us, which my brother thought was totally unfair. He also tried to downplay the whole thing, saying it wasn't a big deal at all. Imagine all this going down while I was just a few steps away from my friend Stella. By this point, I was beyond mad. I was so angry that I was crying and couldn't stop shaking. I didn't hold back when I responded to my brother. I told him straight up that he loves to act like he's the smartest person around. But really he's just not trying hard enough. It's like he's just coasting through life, spending all his time getting sucked into these wild, baseless theories on the internet because he thinks that somehow makes it okay not to do anything productive. I called him out, saying he was just wasting his life, and I didn't want him in my house anymore. Right after that, my dad jumped into the conversation, trying to smooth things over. He said he was sorry if it seemed like I was being asked to do something unreasonable, or as if I was just picking on some guy I didn't even know for no reason. He promised he would have a talk with the priest, and also mentioned that my mom, who was totally on my side, said they would do whatever was necessary to protect us, especially the kids. At that moment, I was so upset and disappointed that I couldn't even bring myself to look at my dad. I just told everyone it was time for them to go and managed to say goodbye to my mom. Then I needed to get away from all that, so I went to the garage to find my husband. He was waiting for us, expecting my brother and me to come back and hang out. I had to explain the whole mess to him, telling him every detail about the argument and how it all blew up. At first I was like, let's just get these folks out of our place super fast, but then when stuff hit the fan I switched into superhero mode and totally forgot to loop in my husband. He's totally on my side though. He thinks my dad and brother are not being cool about it. But here's the deal. He's letting me take the wheel because it's my family drama, but he's totally ready to back me up if we need to chat more about it. Now I'm wondering, am I being too much? Like if I tell the people who need to know what went down, am I making a mountain out of a molehill and making this guy look bad? I don't think I am, but I just can't get my head around why my dad and brother don't see it my way. Update 1. I have an appointment with a priest tomorrow at 2. I will be going with my father, because he was there and still I can decide for herself if she'd like to come. I will not force her. Edit. I'd like to address some of the more common comments I'm seeing. Many people have questioned why I waited for my dad to handle this instead of taking the lead and speaking to the head priest myself. I honestly thought I could count on him. I was raped by a boyfriend in high school, but never told anyone. I tried to suppress it for as long as I could. But 3 years later, I found myself in a bad situation in college. And while I wasn't harmed, it caused everything to come out. My father was beside himself. He wanted to kill the boy and felt so much guilt because he wasn't able to protect me. I honestly believed that the experience he had with me would make him act with much more urgency. Clearly, I was wrong. Regardless of that, I still should have been the one to handle this and shouldn't have waited for my dad. I also know that the Catholic Church has a shit record when it comes to SAW. I love my faith and my religion, but I do have a lot of issues with the church itself. That being said, I've never been given any reason to doubt that my kids would be safe at church with my parents. They have many friends that they go to church with and are involved in youth group. I knew there was going to be some pushback simply because the initial situation happened at a Catholic church. I won't try to change anyone's mind, but I will say that my experience in the church up to this point has always been good, and I found a lot of comfort in going to masses of my children. I would never knowingly put my children in harm's way. I'll do my best to update you all after the meeting tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for all the love and support. Update 2. Before we get into all the juicy updates and stuff, I need to straighten out some things people have been buzzing about on the internet. It's like when you hear rumors in school and you want to set the record straight before they get out of hand. So, about Stella and that day at church. Some folks seem to think she was there all by herself, like she was some lone ranger in a pew. But that's not the case. Her grandparents were with her. It's just that they weren't attached at her hip or anything. They were around, but not right next to her every single minute. You know how it is. Sometimes you're with family, but you're not always standing right next to them. Enter Joseph, this older gentleman who uses a walker to get around. But church doors can be a real pain to open, especially if you've got your hands full with a walker. Stella, being the helpful person she is, held the door open for him. It's a small act of kindness, the kind you'd hope anyone would do in that situation. After she helps him, Joseph asks Stella if she could follow him over to another door, not far at all from where they were, just a few steps away. He needed a hand passing out some flyers for the Knights of Columbus, which is this group he's a part of. Stella thought it was a bit strange, sure, but then she figured, well, he's just an older guy who needs help, and we're inside a church, so everything should be okay. I know. When you hear Catholic Church, a lot of people immediately think of all the bad stuff that's been in the news, and it's pretty serious. But here's the thing about the priest at this church, the one we actually met and talked to. I trust him, like really trust him. He's the same priest who officiated my husband's and my wedding. I've got a lot of faith in him to do the right thing. I'm not trying to convince anyone to change their views on the church or ignore the issues that have happened. I just want to share our side of the story, give you the full picture of what went down with Stella at church, and why I feel okay about the priest we're dealing with. It's like when you know someone really well and you just have this gut feeling that they're one of the good ones. That's how I feel about this priest. So I just wanted to clear the air and make sure everyone knows what's really going on. So you might be wondering, what could possibly go wrong, right? I totally get that the Catholic Church hasn't always been on the up and up when it comes to handling really bad situations, like when someone gets hurt in a way they shouldn't. But here's the thing, the priest we're talking about, he's one of the good guys, seriously. He's not just any priest. He's the one who married my husband and me. I've known him for a while and I truly believe he's someone who always tries to do the right thing, and just so you know, I'm not here to make you see the church differently or anything. I respect your views now about my own experiences. They've been pretty positive both for me and my family. It's been all good, and just to clear things up, Joseph, the guy in this story, he doesn't work for the church or lead any groups or volunteer stuff. He's just this quirky older guy who loves going to church every single day. He really likes to be part of things, you know. Now for the juicy part of the story, the update. So today I went to this meeting and I made sure to record everything on my phone because you never know. My dad kicked things off by mentioning something about last Saturday's mass to Father Thomas. Let's keep it short and call him that. Here's where it gets interesting. Joseph, this guy, he was being way too friendly and it made Stella super uncomfortable, and I couldn't just sit there. I had to speak up. I told them everything Stella had told me about what happened, and let me tell you, I was shocked. And it turns out this isn't the first time Joseph's been weird, but this time it was way out of line. He's been going around telling people they're not good enough Catholics if they're not part of this group called the Knights of Columbus. So that's the whole drama. It's like something out of a movie, right? But it's important to talk about these things no matter how uncomfortable they might be. He was told emphatically that he cannot say things like that. He was also asked not to come back to volunteer at the soup kitchen because of how he was bullying the homeless people into becoming Catholic. He said it is clear to him that Joseph has some psychological problems, but there has never been any complaints about him like this. My father tried to say that at some point in Joseph's life, it may have been normal to speak like that to women. My mother and I all looked at him and said no, it has never been normal or okay for an old man to speak like that or to behave that way with any woman regardless of the age. He asked what I was seeking. I told him that I wanted to ensure the safety of all the young women at the parish and ensure that no other girl would be put in the position that Stella was in. I also told him that sometimes elderly people have their driver's licenses taken away, and perhaps they should be barred from volunteering in any capacity of the church from this point on. So here's what happened. My dad said he was going to talk to the person in charge of keeping things safe at our church to make sure bad stuff doesn't happen again. Then my mom said my dad would chat with this guy named Joseph about it. But I jumped in and said, no way, my husband and I will handle talking to Joseph. A bunch of people told me I shouldn't just wait around for my dad to deal with it because it's my daughter we're talking about. And they were totally right. I'm not going to just sit back and let my dad have a cozy chat with this guy, telling him he needs to change how he talks. Nope. I handed him my business card and told him to keep me in the loop. I made it clear that after he talks to Joseph and figures out things with the safety team, he needs to fill me in. I want to know how they plan to fix this and set up a meeting with me, my husband, and Joseph. When we were leaving, I made sure my parents, especially my dad, understood that brushing off stuff like this is exactly why so many girls and women don't speak up about these things, and it was nothing short of sexual harassment of a minor. I told my father that he can still think Joseph is a nice old man, but that I would never be able to look at him the same way again. I don't know if I can trust him with my kids. That was the gut punch he needed, because despite this new side of my father I'm seeing, he's always been a wonderful grandfather to all my kids. He is still an apology, but she doesn't want one. She emphatically said she just wants to put this behind her and doesn't want to talk about it anymore. As far as my brother goes, I got a non-apology apology from him via text this morning. It shouldn't go without saying I'm sorry for getting involved and I wish I hadn't interjected myself in the situation. It's not my place and I support whatever you want to do. I haven't responded because I will go off on him again. I think I'm just going to let my husband deal with his bitch ass. Well, that's all I've got, y'all. Once I hear back from you and have a meeting with Joseph, I'll try to update y'all again. Thanks again to everyone who gave advice on how to help Stella through this and how to handle another situation like this, because let's be honest, you will. Update 3. Many of you asked for an update on the situation with Joseph after we met with him. I'm a bit technologically deficient and have no idea how to link the previous posts, so if you're not familiar with the situation, you can go to my profile to see the originals. Earlier this week I got a call from my mom and she told me that when she and dad went to Mass last weekend, they spoke to Father Thomas before Mass, and he told them that he had spoken to Joseph about his behavior and told him that he was out of line in general with how he approaches people and tries to convince/guilt people into becoming Catholic, but that his behavior with Stella was 100% inappropriate and wouldn't be tolerated. Father Thomas told my parents that he seemed to be very apologetic and remorseful. Shortly after that conversation with Father Thomas, Joseph arrived at Mass and pulled his walker up to the same door he stationed himself at with Stella and prepared to hand out brochures. There was no girl with him this time, thank goodness, but it really pissed my mom off that he seemed to move on without any consequences. She approached Jasper and asked him what he was doing, and she said he was very dismissive of her and told her he had every right to sit there and hand out brochures for the church's different ministries. My mom said, "Well, Jasper, nobody would have an issue with you doing this if you weren't such a condescending bully about it. And what you did to my granddaughter was gross and inappropriate. If you can't behave, then you shouldn't be sitting here interacting with people." Joseph told my mom that he did nothing wrong. He was just being nice, so she just stood there next to him to make sure that he didn't cross any lines. He was so irritated that she wouldn't leave his side that he went and took his seat in the church and waited for Mass to start. She also said that she was going to tell her friends with young daughters, granddaughters, to not let them be alone with him. That same day that I spoke to my mom, I got a call from Father Thomas. He said he spoke to Joseph and said that while he was apologetic, he didn't think that my husband and I having a conversation with Joseph would be productive. He said he honestly believes that he has some mental deficiencies and that he is just a really stubborn old man. He was supposed to be moving across the country to live with his daughter a few days ago, but his wife fell and was hospitalized, so the move likely won't happen until she is healed and can make that journey. He said that my mom spoke to him after Mass and told him she was upset that he was still sitting at that same door and she wanted him to do something about it. But it's a public space and there's only so much you can do. But that the way my mom handled it was classic. I told him I understand that he's in a hard position, but that my suggestion to him and all the other priests, volunteers, and staff members would be that if they see a girl or young woman with Joseph at Mass, the way Stella was to approach them and make conversation with her to make sure that she is okay. I spoke to Stella and my husband about the conversations I had with both my mom and Father Thomas, and they both are fine with the way things are. Stella reiterated that she just wants to move forward and forget about him as a service project. She wants to start a ministry with a safe environment program to help girls and boys become more comfortable speaking up when someone is making them uncomfortable or they feel unsafe. I'm so proud of her for this, and Father Thomas has set up a meeting for us to see what we can do and how we can start it. Things with my brother are still unresolved. I just don't know what to even say to him. If you read my previous posts, you can see that I can be a bit long-winded and I don't want to have a long drawn-out conversation. But I also have a lot that I want to get off my chest, so I'm struggling with how to approach it. A lot of people took issue with the fact that I hadn't accepted his apology, and that when I initially responded to him during the argument, I made it personal. Prior to the nastiness, my husband and I had been talking to him about his marriage. He brought it up and how he and his wife married 7 years, only talked for about 11 minutes a day. And it's only ever about the kids, they have 2 under 5. We've been telling him for months that individual therapy would be hugely beneficial, as would marriage counseling. But he just keeps saying it's a racket and they can't afford it. My parents have offered to pay for it, as have my husband and I. That conversation ended with me asking him if this is the type of marriage he would want for his kids. He didn't have a response. He just looked at me and said something to know about my brother is that he has a Jupiter-sized inferiority complex and he overcompensated by trying to make himself seem like the smartest, most virtuous person in the room. And when he realizes he's not or wrong about something, he lashes out with personal The text. My husband thinks that him coming at me was his way of lashing out for making him feel stupid. He's probably right. I just want to do this right so that our relationship can be somewhat salvaged. I absolutely adore myself and their babies, and I don't want to lose contact with them. So that's it. Mostly resolved. Stella's a freaking rock star, and I can't wait to see where life will take her. And hopefully I will find the wisdom and the words I need my brother to hear. Thanks y'all. Thanks y'all. If you've made it to this point, you're a beast.